You're listening to Sustainably Geeky, the podcast for everyday environmentalists.
Hi, and welcome to Sustainably Geeky, episode 17. Today we are joined by our regulars, Jen and Chris, and we also have a special guest, Drew Demler. And we're going to be talking about horticulture today. So Drew is the director of horticulture for the State Fair of Texas. And the biggest part of his role is as the head grower for Big Tex Urban Farms. The farm grows produce outdoors in raised beds, as well as in a greenhouse using hydroponics. Drew has 25 years of experience in the green industry, and his former jobs include horticulture manager at the Dallas Arboretum and owning his own nursery and landscape business in the Austin area before starting in his current role. So you have quite the resume, Drew, and I'm curious as to kind of what got you into this field and where your passion for growing things came from. Tell us a little more about yourself.
For sure. Okay. So yeah, growing up, I grew up in South Louisiana, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and my father owned some land about an hour north of where I grew up in Baton Rouge, just across the Mississippi line. And we raised hybrid pines for the pulp industry. So very different than anything I'm doing now, but that may have fostered some level of interest, in just watching things grow, just being outside. I've always loved that ever since I was a little boy, and just watching things grow. And then in high school, I started in the nursery business. I mean, it was like the first, quote unquote, real job that I ever had. And I just stuck with that for a long, long time and just kind of climbed that ladder, and then somehow wound up doing what I'm doing now, which is crazy. I know I feel like I've probably had one of the most interesting careers in this field for sure. And it's been a long and winding road to get here for sure. But
Yeah.
sure glad I got to it.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of fun. And is this your first job specifically with horticulture or I'm sorry, with hydroponics, or
Yes.
did you do some of that? Okay.
No, this
So,
is
so
my first getting into to hydroponics for sure.
okay. So I guess we'll start with the basics. What is hydroponics, and um, you know, how is it different from, I guess, conventional farming for those that don't know anything about it?
Okay, so strict definition, I guess you'd say, is hydroponics is growing plants without soil, where you're using water and some type of a nutrient blend to grow the plants instead of using soil. You can get real broad with it, or you can get more specific with it. But I mean, some people would even argue that drip irrigating nursery stock in potting soil counts as hydroponics, but a lot of people would say it doesn't. So you can kind of interpret that as you will. What I'm doing, I'm using it specifically in methods that are used in commercial farming, indoors in a greenhouse. Um, and I have all different systems, which I'm sure we'll get into. But for us here in Texas, especially, hydroponic production of vegetables to be maximized really needs to be done in a controlled environment of some sort, either in a greenhouse or a warehouse that's been converted to a grow room, or a shipping container, or something where you can keep the climate controlled.
Yeah, because it gets a little hot here for
Just a
those
bit.
that don't know. So, I've heard the term hydroponics and aquaponics. What's the difference? Just to kind of clarify, a lot of people might use them interchangeably.
Awesome. Yeah, and I appreciate that question too, because it is very different. So what I'm doing in hydroponics, I'm basically using a reservoir of water and creating a nutrient solution in that water to grow the plants. And it comes in all different styles. But in aquaponics, you're using fish waste, which then gets filtered and goes through some different processes to produce to basically to fertilize the water. So that's the difference. In hydroponics, there's no fish.
Okay. Is one easier or harder to manage than the other? It seems like the fish might be a little more, like one more element to have to
For
manage.
sure. And in fact, that's why we have stuck with using hydroponics right now. Who knows? In time, we may try aquaponics, but that's initially what we studied on. Through the company, we thought about getting into aquaponics, and then we had a number of people in the area tell us that we should really try doing this hydroponic thing first. And then if we wanted to graduate into aquaponics to do that, but especially in warm weather climates, there's not a lot of great success rate. In particular here in DFW area for sure. With seeing you don't see a lot of successes, unfortunately, just yet in aquaponics. So that's
Okay.
why we stuck with hydroponics. It's a little more straightforward of a grow. You have a lot more control over the variables, and if you lose one system in aquaponics, you're going to lose everything. If you lose your fish, you lose your plants, and then you're left with nothing. Um, where it's a little bit easier to kind of make a mistake and restart in hydroponics for sure.
Interesting. Ladies, what questions do you have for him? You have anything yet?
He keeps answering them every time I think of them.
One of the questions I submitted to you earlier, Jennifer, to ask him ahead of time was there's some questions about what's more sustainable, when you're considering the conventional farming versus hydroponics, because I know you mentioned you have to build a building and you have to air condition it. And so have you done that cost comparison for the two methods to see what's the most return on investment, or what are you seeing in that regard?
Great question. So yeah, so your ROI is once you get past the initial investment setup of getting into hydroponics, your ROI is pretty good versus outdoor farming. So you're going to be able to create, a lot more in a much smaller space using hydroponics, and they operate so much more efficiently. So on the subject of sustainability, to give you some idea of what I'm talking about, when I'll periodically have to fill up my deep water culture ponds, I'd say on average I fill them up once a month, where I just top them off with fresh water. When I do that, I did it today, by the way. So when I do that, I have the hose running maybe an hour, maybe 2 hours, versus when I water my outdoor plants, especially during the summer months, my raised gardens or even my in-ground plantings, I'm 3-4 hours every single day to keep things productive. So, I mean, the water usage is way less. Your labor cost is going to be way less. And then the other thing that I really, really like about it is in any one of my systems, the fertilizers and so forth that we're using, be it synthetic or organic or anything, they stay right there in that building. They never run off into an aquifer. They don't wind up in a lake or in your drinking water system. They literally stay right there in my reservoirs. So for those reasons, it's a much more environmentally friendly way to grow. We feel like once you have the infrastructure in place, which of course is a big initial investment, they're a lot more efficient in the long run. So it's one of those things where if you can pay for it up front, you can do very well, and survive until you start getting your crops out. You can do very well with these types of systems. A lot less space wasted too, like there's no tractors. You don't have to, leave wide row spacing for your tractors and harvesting equipment and so forth. It's all inside of this one building and cranking out, the comparable yields of what you would get on many, many acres.
Is that cost taking into consideration the cost to cool the building, replace the equipment that you do have to buy, regularly and things like that as well? Like you still come out ahead, I guess, with hydroponics
You
with
still
all
come
that
at it
considered.
for sure. The trick
Okay.
is to make yourself be scalable, to where you're producing enough units to be able to offset those costs, which is the same with any business. But it's just a little bit different in hydroponics. There's really not like the way I cool my greenhouse is very different than what you would do in a commercial farm. I am air conditioned, and I am because we're an exhibit. So we really have to be considerate of our fair goers when they're coming through, that we give them a nice cool place to relax and so forth. Um,
And I
and then
have
we
to say it was really nice to be able to go into that air-conditioned building the day I went because it was hot.
I know, right? Yeah, you came early when it was still like smoking hot. Yeah.
Yes.
And then that's part of the experience. We want it to be kind of a little oasis where people can come in and take a break and get a breath of fresh air before they get back out into it. But anyway, so what most farms do, commercial farms would do, is just use a wet wall technology to keep their greenhouse cool, which is basically a glorified swamp cooler. Uh, and it's a lot less of an electrical pull than what my HVACs are. And that's pretty much what you'd find at a commercial greenhouse anywhere.
Okay. Awesome.
So what were your like upfront initial investment costs so we can get like some sort of scale?
On average, to create, I can give you, and this is just a sort of an industry standard number, to create a greenhouse that would be about 1 acre in size. Your initial investment is going to be around 1 to 1.5 million per acre of greenhouse.
Wow. Okay. So is this something that's feasible for the at-home gardener, kind of hobby gardener, or not someone who's looking to go full-scale commercial? Or I know you guys had a lot of different machines set up where it looked like they could kind of do well in a smaller environment or just like a home or something. But what's better if I'm looking to start a garden on my own?
Everything, all of our systems are very scalable. So it is definitely something that a homeowner could do very easily, if they have the right setup. And we display some systems that are really strictly for homeowners. And then we showcase some systems that were scaled down so that you could do it in your garage or something. So the one that we have that is made specifically for homeowners are these things called tower gardens. And it's a vertical system. And each one of them holds between 24 and 44 plants, depending on what size you want. And it just looks like a piece of PVC pipe that sits on top of a green pedestal, and inside of that pedestal is where your water lives. And again, that's where you add the nutrients and so forth. And you can even get light kits for them, grow light kits. So if you don't have a sunny window, or you wanted to do it in your kitchen or somewhere inside your house, you just plug that dude in and you're ready to grow. And
Cool.
they're not the most efficient or the best ways to grow at a commercial level, but they would give you all the produce you'd want to eat for sure. You can produce great greens. We've done like chives and basil and edible flowers and some fun stuff on them too. So you can get creative with them.
Yeah, you had cucumbers on one of the hanging vertical ones,
Yeah,
right? That was
yeah.
pretty neat.
Those are my Dutch buckets. Um, and that's actually a more commercial, yeah, it's a commercial
Okay.
type system. It's something that you would see. Those are used to produce vine crops
Okay.
mostly. So I grow tomatoes, cucumbers, and peppers right now. And you can also do things like eggplants and pole beans in them as well. And that's
Cool.
another one that's very scalable. I've seen some amazing stuff done. There's some really cool DIY videos. Like if you get on YouTube and look up DIY Dutch buckets, you can actually make them out of like 5 gallon paint buckets that you'd get from Home Depot, and some real
Wow.
simple supplies, and you're ready to rock and roll.
So I live in the city, like downtown San Antonio now, and I don't have a yard. If I wanted to put something like this in my kitchen, like I have a space for it maybe, what would something like that small cost? Do you sell that kind of thing?
We don't sell anything. We're strictly like research and development, and then we actually donate all the produce to
Okay.
like 6 different nonprofit groups. But check out these tower garden things that I'm talking about. The thing is, because they grow vertically, they take up like very, very little room at all, and they're capable of producing a fair amount of produce off of each thing. There's also another thing called arrow gardens, which literally just sit on a tabletop, and those are really cool too. I haven't grown with those yet, but I do like my towers. I like them really well, but they sure look neat. So there's a system for everybody, for sure.
You could go down a rabbit hole researching all the options, I'm sure,
Oh, you
and
can.
the DIY stuff.
If you get on the DIY videos, you're gonna be there all night long. I promise.
That's awesome. So you
Oh
mentioned,
yeah,
oh, go ahead.
sorry. I was just gonna say I definitely remember having to walk a garden outside when I did like a vegetable garden, like almost every day in the Texas heat when we had those like 100-degree plus days for
Mhm.
like 6 months in a row. And I was like, this was a terrible year to plant.
I know.
This is why I have a timer on my hose or
Yeah,
my sprinkler, yeah.
seems it's
I know
more
it's
to do it indoors instead.
Yeah.
yeah, no doubt. It's funny. I feel kind of guilty because people were coming into our greenhouse touring during the fair, and they're like, "Oh man, your cucumbers look so great, or your tomatoes, or your lettuce. How are you growing these lettuce heads?" And I'm like, "Man, I cheat. I grow them inside." But
Yeah.
I also am able to comfort people and tell them, "Hey, if you saw what my outdoor garden looks like right now, you'd see I'm no better off than you out there.
Yeah.
That's for sure."
Heat is no joke. So you mentioned something that I wanted to talk about, which is that you guys kind of do this for research and development, and you donate a lot of the produce. So first, tell me or tell us kind of how you got started on that venture. Like, why did the State Fair of Texas decide to start a greenhouse and hydroponic garden, and then why you decided to donate the food that you grow?
Great. Thank you for letting me speak on that. Again, kind of a long and winding story. So that greenhouse is actually 10 years old. It was originally built before my tenure with the state fair, and its main purpose was to grow ornamental plants. So it was used to overwinter a collection of tropical plants that we used to display around the grounds. And during the fair itself, it was a model railroad garden that we would landscape around. And it was a really cute exhibit, man. I've got 3 sons, 3 young sons, and all 3 of them loved it. They would get excited to come see Thomas and everything. But flash forward a little bit. Um, in 2016, the company had decided that we wanted to become much more community focused, much more outreach focused. Um, Fair Park is actually located in the middle of one of the worst food deserts in the United States. It area that has a real bad reputation outside the grounds. It's unfortunate. It's a really beautiful place, and I've met some of the best people I've ever known. But it definitely has its problems. And the farm's co-founder and myself, his name is Jason Hayes, and he's actually our vice president of branding for the state fair. He knew I knew how to grow vegetables because I'd been doing it for fun, for several years up there. And at the time, my focus was on all the ornamental stuff. So I was growing like hanging baskets and palm trees and beautifying the grounds. Well, anyway, he asked me if I would like to help start a garden at the fair. And we was like, initially we thought, well, we can get the staff involved. We can make it like our own state fair community garden, and we'll donate all the produce. So we started in 2016, and initially we made a couple of really key partnerships there locally um, in the community through the produce donation. And those 2 groups, there's Cornerstone Baptist Church and the Baylor Scott and White Health and Wellness Institute. We began donating to them when we had stuff. That first year there wasn't a lot, We were just kind of trialing it out. Everything was grown outdoors, but you could see right away the impact it had on the members of the community when we would bring them this fresh stuff. And I mean, it would be like a couple baskets of tomatoes and some black eyed peas or something, but you could see the expression that this was fresh, and this was something different and something that they hadn't had before. So moving forward to 2017, the company decided to expand our program. We had gotten a little bit of press that year and had won over the community, so to speak, with it. And they were excited. The community was excited about it. So we decided to expand. And that's when we first started toying with the idea of getting into aquaponics. It was our initial thought. And then eventually we found out about hydroponics and decided to go that route. Well, it just so happens that one of the largest hydroponic supply companies has an office in the DFW area. So it's a group called Horticulture, and they're really kind of our partners in this whole greenhouse program now. And I met them, and I was able to tour what at the time was their demo greenhouse. And I saw their deep water culture ponds and their NFT system, and I just fell in love with it. And I said, yeah, this is what we need at the fair. So that first year, we only had one system. Actually, we had two. We had the one deep water culture pond and the six tower gardens that I mentioned earlier. We had those on display along with the trains. And this is 2017. And two things got our attention right away. Number one was how incredibly productive these systems can be when everything is going right. And then number two, the public went nuts for it. Like, it was like they weren't even seeing the trains anymore. They would just go to that corner where we had our little hydroponics exhibit, and that we would be there answering questions about it all day long.
That's awesome.
It was really great. It was so cool. So we realized that we were onto something big, and it was allowing us to exponentially increase our output of food that we could donate into this community in need, and gave us a great exhibit. So we've spent the last 2 years just retrofitting that greenhouse, system after system after system, grow lights, everything, to getting it to the exhibit that you saw today, where we fill up the whole thing basically with different hydroponic systems.
So who funds all that? Is that all funded by the state fair, or do you get sponsors or folks that donate?
All of the money, 100% of the money comes from the state fair, Texas. We're not even allowed to go after any government grants or anything at this point. They want to fund it, the whole thing in-house. So that way, and it makes it really great because we're able to do data collection and present very unbiased information, which is kind of gained us a big attention in our industry as well as in our community. People can know that they can get the straight story from us. And then, yeah, we can, some of the equipment and so forth does get donated to us. Hort America's group has been very generous with us, and they've given us a lot of really cool toys to play with in there. So big props to them for helping us.
Yeah, that's really cool. I love that, the state fair is not only a place you can go to have fun and get entertained, but it's also y'all are giving back and looking for ways to kind of use the unique assets that you have and putting it towards something that helps the community and is sustainable, of course. So
absolutely.
Props to big techs, man.
I love it. Love that.
Yeah. Yeah, so let me see here. I did want to kind of delve into, I guess, the types of crops you can grow in this type of system. Are there some that you can or cannot grow? Someone also had down, can you do non-GMO or organic crops this way? Like what, I guess how diverse can you get with a hydroponic system?
Okay, yeah, you can really grow pretty much anything you want, but certain crops are definitely better than others. And I'm going to break this down into two categories. There are types of hydroponic systems that are ideal for growing greens, leafy greens and herbs. And then there are types that are more appropriate for growing vine crops. So on the green side, there's like the deep water culture ponds that I mentioned, which I've got two of them. They're basically rectangular shaped structures that you build out of lumber, cover with a pond liner, and fill with water, and then the plants literally float on top of a raft, and the roots just dangle in down into that nutrient rich water, and it is so cool to see. And that system is ideal for growing lettuce. I grow collard greens, arugula, kale. I've done basil, chives, any of the herbs like that. And the other system that's really ideal for, especially at the commercial level, greens production is called NFT, or nutrient film technique. And you use these long plastic channels that have holes cut in them, and you set your plant starts in those holes, and then you have a reservoir of water, and you cycle that water through the bottoms of the channels at a very, very slow trickle constantly. And it creates a really cool, really good growing environment for the greens.